Good choice.
Awesome.
It's big. It's time.
I'm sorry, I can't sell you this car. Your credit is terrible.
No, what? Your ad said no credit, no problem.
Yes, but no credit is different than bad credit.
Look, I really need this car.
Well, you have some other pre-owned models that are more in your price range.
No. I need this car.
She?
I need this car. I need this girl to notice me. She's the most beautiful girl in the world, and I walk by her every day in the park, and if I had this car, maybe, just maybe she'd notice me.
Here we go. This will work better than your car idea.
Wait, what is this?
This, my friend, is the answer to your dreams. It's a love contract.
Excuse me?
Just sign the contract, and the next time this dream girl of yours lays her big, beautiful eyes on you, she'll fall instantly in love with you, and only you, until the day you die.
Are you serious? Is this some kind of joke to you or something?
No joke. Sign the contract. She falls in love with you. No car, no credit, no problem. Everything your heart desires.
What are you, the devil or something?
Something like that.
So you're saying if I sign this, the girl of my dreams is just gonna fall in love with me?
Yes, sir. The moment she makes eye contact with you, she falls head over heels in love with you. Guaranteed.
What's the catch? There's always some kind of catch with you. What do you, get my soul or something? Or firstborn child?
No catch. Sign right here, and all your dreams come true. And, I guess, technically, all hers too. It's a 2-for-1 deal. You can't beat that.
Why would you do this? What's in it for you?
Honestly, I get a bad rap. I'm just an old softy, a romantic at heart. Love bringing people together.
All right. Do you have a pen?
That's the spirit. A special pen. Special occasions call for a special pen.
What's all this small print? Is this where you get my soul?
Oh, that's all metaphysical, legal mumble jumble. Actually, it's more for my protection than yours. Sign the paper. Good. I wish you both the best.
Is it getting hot in here?
Oh, you're so cute. I know we just met, but I think I'm in love. Yes, you want to come home with me? Yeah, you want to come home with me?
And welcome back. It's another episode of ConTinual and a special hot off the press. It is another publisher takeover here with Valhalla Press. And so I hope you guys enjoyed that special first world release of the book trailer that just came out. We have the creators of that, and we'll be talking a little bit about that film as well. So that's kind of a first for us here on ConTinual, having that. I'm Jim Nettles. I will be your host and your moderator today. So what we have with us is we're going to be talking about The Devil's Due from Valhalla Books Press. And so I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves first. Josh, I'm going to start with you.
Hey, I'm Josh Vasquez. I'm one of the authors on the anthology, also the author of the Savannah Zombie novel series and the North Pole Zombie series.
Mark?
Hi, my name is Mark Gunnells. I am an author from South Carolina. Been publishing for about 10 years and have a book coming up with Valhalla next year.
Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Gyzander. I write science fiction and horror stories, and I also edit a series of charity anthologies for Writer Punk Press.
Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Brune, and I write all different genres of speculative fiction. I also publish anthologies, horror anthologies through Crone Girls Press.
Bobby?
I am Bobby Nash. I've written a book or two. So I've been on the ConTinual episodes before, so you probably have heard me spout off that. So I won't do it again.
We've seen you everywhere. We've heard you everywhere, but
I'm thrilled to be part of this anthology and happy to be here.
Alledria.
Well, hello there, y'all, and I'm back for another publisher takeover here with Valhalla Books. And I am incredibly happy to not only be a member of the anthology, but also to be the assisting editor on The Devil's Due.
And last but not least is the one and only, the infamous Adam Messer from Valhalla Books.
Hey, y'all. How's it going? I'm glad to be here. I love what you're doing, Jim, you and your team with the ConTinual, and thank you so much for having us today. This is just wonderful.
So why don't we talk a little bit about Valhalla Books? What are you guys up to, other than, of course, this little book, something Devil's Due that wants to come out, and you guys, are doing things like creating entire films around it.
Yeah. Well, the Valhalla Books, as an indie author myself, I wanted to do something that I felt was really special and unique to me. And earlier this year, everything kind of, just hit the fan with everything, right? So I was like, I want to do something. Last year, I started planning out this anthology, asked the authors to, submit, and I handpicked all but two of the authors, and the other two were referrals. And we were scheduled to come out in May. That didn't happen, so I decided that I wanted to do something with it. And it's just turned out to be a wonderful thing. I really feel like the stories, the authors have done a great job. And talking about the little movie short that we just played, Josh Vasquez, who was on, just a second ago, he and I have been friends for a long time. And I said to him, hey, I'd like to do a book trailer. And but I don't want it to be a book trailer. I want it to be like a movie short. And Josh came back to me with a script. I cast the actors. We got the location. Josh did all the principal photography. He's done all the editing, and we worked together with the directing and all. And it just turned out really fabulous. And it follows the same premise as the book. So there's people always think there's going to be some great little shortcut to a deal. And there's always a catch, and the devil always comes back to collect. And that's what the anthology is about. That's what the movie's about. And, so it's a lot of fun. And then Mark, Allan Gunnells, also had said about, he's got a book coming out. So he will be our first standalone author to have an independent books published with us. And that's going to be coming out, I believe we're still kind of nailing it down, but it's either going to be the end of January or the first part of February. So I'm pretty excited about it.
That's great. Congratulations, Mark. So let's talk a little bit about The Devil's Due. The premise of it, like you say, there's always a deal to be made, but there's always a catch. So how did you go through picking the authors, pulling the stories together, the rest of that for this particular anthology?
Well, that is a great question. I love working with independent authors. I talk to a lot of indie authors on my radio show, and all of the folks that are in the anthology, and even the new folks, are folks that I've done work with, or I've interviewed, or I've known over the years. And I felt like they were all really good authors, interesting storytellers, but also the doers, the folks that actually, can follow through and when they commit to something, they actually, produce. And that was a, really interesting part of it. But the first one, I wanted to make sure, because it is our initial launch, I wanted it to be the best representation of writing today. And I'm not just bragging, I'm not saying this, but I really feel like our anthology has some of the best writing, some of the best stories that are out there right now. And that was the main way that I picked the authors. And I was, very happy. I feel blessed that they all said yeah. So, just kind of worked out that way.
So let's talk a little bit about the stories that are in the book. How you got to them, what the inspiration was behind these particular deals. So Alledria, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk a little bit about yours, and not to mention that, but also the fact you're one of the editors on the book. So what was that like?
Being one of the editors on the book means that I got to read everybody else's work before everybody else did. And it also means that my favorite story in the anthology is not the one that I wrote.
Allie is the only one that's been the only other person to read all the stories, except for me so far. And the authors will all get a chance to do that. Like, as of this recording, I'm still working on the final touches, but yeah, I was really happy, Allie, when you told me. You're like, oh my gosh, these are wonderful stories. It was so cool.
Because I actually went with the classic, I want to be a best-selling author, because that is, of course, my own thing, which I want to do one day, is become a best-selling author. So I started from the person who has nothing but has a dream, and then they make a deal to get what they want, and then they sort of get it, but they sort of don't, because that's the way a deal with the devil works.
And we now have an official call because we have a cat. So Carol, what about your story?
Well, I had an intriguing flash when Adam first told me the premise for this story, and I'm going to keep this PG-13, but the idea I had was actually inspired by an adult film called The Devil and Miss Jones, which is actually a very Faustian kind of thing. So what if you wanted something and you actually got it, but it wasn't what you thought it was? That's what it comes right down to. So I had to sort of take the idea and turn it around so that it was regular people in a regular circumstance and such, not an adult film. But I like doing things like that, where you have an idea that you have to craft your story around. It sort of makes it a little more challenging in a way. I also like writing whatever I like, which is fun too, but I think it's really intriguing to take your focus and put it onto a specific idea. So Adam, thank you for the really cool idea. This was been a great story to work on.
And I loved your story too, Carol. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Hey, so when Adam had proposed the idea, I actually, an idea kind of popped in my head, and it was a what if. And it was like, okay, so what if someone made a deal with the devil, but it was a case of identity theft, which is actually the title of the story. And I was working with that idea and trying to figure out why I couldn't get it to work. And then I realized the theme is actually more along the lines of the fact that if evil exists in the world and people are willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want, sometimes you don't actually need a deal for the devil to claim you. And so I just kind of ran with that sort of story idea and that sort of theme, and came up with a noir detective who is like a former army, and she drinks all of the time, and which might have been me at one point in this pandemic. And then the other thing too is we were living in California, and I knew we were coming back to Fayetteville. And when I realized that I was trying to set it in New York, and I ended up setting it in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which just worked a whole lot better. Putting it in a military town, and all of the things that people want and can't get. So that's it.
And
Bobby?
you had a really awesome story. I'll be honest with you. The grit of that story is just, it blew me away when I read it. I was like, wow, this is very special. So,
Bobby, let's hear about yours.
Yeah. When I do anthology work, I always try to think, okay, how can I do something different? Because you kind of, with all of us kind of coming at it from the same direction of what the stories are about. The first thing I decided was I want to do something that's not going to be set in the modern day. And so I told him, I says, I want to write a Western. And he's like, okay. And so I decided that what happens if this desert town out in the middle of nowhere, that the deal they made was not an individual, but the people who settled the town. And the deal was that it becomes a boom town because they find the silver mine, the vein of silver under the town. And so the town prospers. And so as the town grows and more people come in, people who are not aware of the deal find themselves in this town when suddenly it's time to pay up. And now these people who have no idea what's going, of the deal find themselves in the middle of the deal. And so it was a lot of fun. And it was, it was cool to play with the idea of monsters and devils and demons in the Old West. And that was fun. I had a good time with that.
Mark?
Well, my story, like a lot of the other people said, sort of came from my initial conversation with Adam. When he invited me to write a story for the anthology, we were talking about Deal with the Devil stories, and I started thinking that I wanted to do something that would be almost like a fairy tale, like a dark, twisted fairy tale. And I also wanted to pursue the idea that maybe sometimes when you get more than you bargain for, what if sometimes maybe the devil gets more than he bargains for in a deal?
Josh?
All right. So my short story idea, which it's called The Plan, it kind of happened before me and Adam even talked about making like short movies and short films and all that stuff. I've always wanted to kind of get into that. So I had this idea for the short film. And then Adam messaged me about doing this anthology. So my thought is like, well, I'm never going to make this short film because that's just something that's never going to happen in my life. So let me just turn it into a short story. I wrote this short story. It's about a guy who has this plan to kind of go and get revenge on an abuser from a young age. So it's kind of like whether or not he sticks to this plan, but of course, like there's a demonic element into it. So yeah, and then of course, a few months later, me and Adam decided to do this whole Dead Pixel Pictures, and you saw the short film before we started. So I guess maybe I should have waited a little bit longer, but I don't know. I got the short story out of it.
So this is one of those things that I always find fun as a conversation is, if you have somebody come to you, you're sitting there at a convention, I've got a great idea for a story. It coming together just with an idea for an anthology like this, where everybody's really running from the same premise. You can already see how much difference there is in how many stories there are in just a similar premise. And so when you have somebody that's like, oh, I'm clamped onto my idea. I love my idea. It's mine. Really, that's the idea is if you're going to be a writer and a creator, there are tons of ideas. And you're not the first one to ever have it. I promise it. It's about how you take it, you turn it, you create it. It's how you execute on it, and the fact that you did execute on it. And I think that's one of those things that, especially when you look at an anthology like this, where you're working on such a tight premise and background, it's how many different ways you can execute it. So, and I know, Adam, you were kind of helping to negotiate who was writing what stories, But how did it feel to you guys in terms to know that everybody's kind of writing around the same premise? Was there a challenge there? Was there any kind of coordination to make sure you weren't rubbing up against each other on too similar a theme, too similar an execution? Who wants to take that one first?
I'll kind of set the story up. Do you mind if I give a shout out to the other authors of the anthology too?
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, because we have 12 authors and we have 13 stories, but we have 12 authors. So I want to give a shout out to Raven Crescent, Shane Nelson, Tim Jeffries, Jude Reed, Winfield Strock. Pretty sure. Sam Gross as well. So I was just like trying to, it's like kind of, you got to juggle around all the names or whatever, but I want to give a shout out to them as well. We just didn't have enough room on the panel to have everybody on the video, which would have been cool, but it just would have been too much chaos. Right. But one of the ways that I try to keep everything going was, no, we didn't talk about who's doing what for their premise. We didn't talk about who's doing, whatever for the stories. I talked with the individual authors, but for the most part, I had a premise. I gave them a premise and I said, this is what I want, a themed anthology. And then they told me what they wanted to write about. And then it was, would you like to read the first chapter? So no, I wanted to read the whole thing. So I just was like, just go with it, because I don't want to inhibit the author's creativity. Some people need a little bit more hand holding, other than others, but I felt like it was better to just have have them do the entire story, run it through, and then we hashed it out about, maybe some minor changes or whatever. But for that part, we have a Facebook group, an author's Facebook group, and then I also sent out emails, but most of that's mostly admin stuff. Not really talking about the creative process per se, but I feel like the authors did a great job with it. And like I said, they're all doers. They're all the ones that, they say, hey, I'm going to hit this deadline, and they hit the deadline. So.
Not all of us. Deadline.
You hit the extended deadline, Rachel. That counts.
Deadlines are.
I was just going to say, I thought that was really helpful too, to have us check in with what our idea was, because that way we didn't have to worry about somebody else writing the same thing, But yeah, if you sit us all down and ask us to tell a story of our childhood, they're all going to be a different story. So this was, a really neat way to take on it.
So here's one of the fun ideas then, because when you're playing with this kind of premise, it's one of those things that if we look at this as a classical trope, if you look at something as traditional as Faustian stories, when you look at The Bargain, when you look at, Milton and Paradise Lost even, and the deals that get cut through there. So as authors and creators, we're out there creating our story. So how much of this was a deal you wanted to cut? So Allie, I'm going to go back to you to start because, of course, you wanted to be the massive best-selling author. We know that's what you want. And that's what you're definitely working towards. So was this writing the bargain you were trying to cut?
When I look right at it, it sort of is, because the reality is I would love for there to be a shortcut, but I know there isn't one. And because I know there isn't one, I just kind of go, if the devil gave me the opportunity, I'd have to think about it really, really hard, because I know that I can get there through means that don't cost my soul.
So, in looking at that from the story, what did writing the story mean for you and your journey? What did you learn from telling this tale? I mean, tackling such a core story about the human experience.
Well, the truth is, what I learned was the simple fact that there is no shortcut. It's just a reminder of what I already know, which is there is no shortcut. You literally will do the work, or you will not get there. And if like with the deadlines that we had, I was writing furiously the night before the deadline because I hadn't finished my story yet. and I needed to finish my story. I mean, I'm the assisting editor on the anthology. It would be absolutely awful if even I had to ask for an extension.
Well,
Bob?
I think too with it, when you get a shortcut like this, or you make a deal that gets you that shortcut, you lose the experience that comes with doing it the other way. So even if you get the shortcut and all seems well, you'll trip yourself up later because you don't have the experience that teaches you, how to deal with getting there, if that makes sense. You can easily trip over yourself because you haven't learned the hard way that you have to do things a certain way. But in terms of my story, no, it was set in the Old West. I wasn't I wasn't around then. And it was more about people finding ways to carry on their family line, and obviously be wealthy land barons as well. Even though that's the main focus of my story, I set my story to where we do follow the two people who had no idea that there was a deal in place. So we're looking at it from the outsider's perspective. And as with everything that I do, my first thought is, who are my characters? And once I get to know the characters, then it's easy to get the reactions to the outlandish things that I put them through.
But from that perspective, when you were telling the story, like you say, there's no shortcut. It's about the experience. So, I think that's one of the things we all see is when you put in the work, it's not about where you wind up. It's the experience that gets you there that really is the thing that carries you to the next step.
Yeah, and in my story, I do try to play that because the two characters that we're kind of following are doing everything. They're not getting the shortcuts. They're going through the hard work of doing everything. And then they see these people that seem to just have things handed to them. And it's kind of like I don't get it. Why is this, And then when they find out, it's kind of like so.
They're kind of like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't take that deal.
Yeah. Well, at least one of them is.
Yeah.
Rachel?
I was going to say the characters in my story, they don't necessarily get a formal deal, except for the one who's doing the shenanigans with the identity theft. For me, I find it very fascinating how we rationalize missteps to ourselves.
What about
I am
regrets?
frozen.
Your audio's good. So,
Well, with Rachel's story,
Yeah,
one of the things I enjoyed about reading. Hey, can you hear us, Rachel? I was going to say one of the things I enjoyed reading about her. No, okay, cool. I was just going to say one of the things I enjoyed about reading your story was the interesting dynamic of the interpersonal relationships with the folks and the real pulling on the heartstrings on some of the stuff. And so I feel like your story was incredible.
So, Carol, what about yours?
My story is somebody who makes a really bad decision and has a chance at a redo. So I'm just going to say I hope I don't really make a really bad decision like that. So let's not have me reenact my story.
But what'd you learn from telling the tale, from exploring the idea?
It was pretty intriguing because I was dealing with some classic tropes as well, and sometimes you have to turn those a little differently. But in a short story, sometimes a touch of a trope will help you. So that was an interesting balance of how much am I using stuff that we're expecting versus something unexpected.
So, Mark, in your story, with the journey you went on, what did that wind up meaning for you? What did you take away from exploring the story and exploring the idea?
Well, I thought it would be interesting to turn it a little differently. A lot of people have talked about, the shortcuts. And in my story, the main character could have actually gotten the result she wanted in a much simpler and quicker way. But she purposefully was calculating in the deal she made because she wanted a greater spectacle and wanted to I don't want to give too much away, but she could have gotten there easier, but she chose a harder path for the result she would get in the end. And I thought that was sort of interesting to look at a character who in a traditional story like that would be the one being victimized by her own deal, and she's turning it on its head and getting more power from it than maybe was expected.
Josh?
So my story, as far as like writing it goes, it's definitely one of the darkest things that I've written. Even though I write about zombie apocalypses and Santa Claus fighting off zombie elves, a lot of my stuff has humor kind of like injected into it. But when you're writing a story about abuse, it's kind of hard to put humor in there while still taking the topic seriously. And then for me, like I come from a like Southern Baptist, Independent Baptist, evangelical background. So with my personal faith, I kind of tried to like work that into the story as well. Like we hear about like child abuse in the church, our mind kind of immediately goes to like the Catholic Church and priests. So I was thinking about how can I do this differently? How can I do it respectfully, but still be able to tell the story? And honestly, it was like one of the hardest things that I've written. There's a couple of times where I just thought about messaging Adam and be like, dude, I can't do this. It kind of just one of those things, like it was down to the wire, down to the extended date, trying to get the story in. But yeah, so it's not so much a deal that went wrong, but it's almost like this demonic presence wronged this person, and so he's there to kind of, in a sense, make it right. But I, like I said, don't want to spoil too much of the story. It's, does he go through with the plan or does he not?
So if we look at things from more of that writer's journey perspective, if we carry this a little bit wider, but if we look at the writer's journey a little bit, the trip we're going through in storytelling in general, do you prefer working with this kind of a story in short form? Would you have liked to have had more runway, more real estate, more time, a novella, a novel to tell the story and explore it? Or do you think that this idea of a deal with the devil is such a snap decision? Usually, was it coming from a moment of desperation? Was it coming from that moment of, I'm just not, I don't have patience, whatever the case may be? When you grab that moment, do you think that short form story works better to tell that kind of a moment, that feel for the characters? Or would you have liked to have had that more runway to tell the story and tell the tale?
I'd like to start off with that one because I actually wrote a story for the anthology as well. And one of the things that I asked the authors to do was to write a story up to about 10,000 words if they wanted to. It could be 10,000 words or less, just so that they could have a little bit more space to explore it. And for me, when I was reading the stories as well as writing my own story, but I feel like it just varies. The whole premise was to have some kind of twist, at the end. And some authors are really good with, quick and short hit with it. Some authors are really good with like a slow burn. I love Allan Gunnells was saying that, he likes to write like with the slow burn. So I feel it's because we're all different and we all have our own styles. I feel like that everybody has a unique way of storytelling and being able to hit on those points in a variety. So it's not all of them don't have the same rhythm or cadence with the story. So
I would like to point out that I actually have written a novel that is a deal with the devil. It's called 13, and it is currently being shopped.
So in telling the same, in using the same general idea for story, how did it feel telling the same concept of story in short form versus novel?
Well, you have a lot more time to develop how someone rationalizes. I think, was it Bobby that said that you rationalize your missteps? That you really, no, it was Rachel who said you rationalize your missteps, you rationalize your mistakes, you rationalize your continued taking of this deal, because in a novel you've got a dozen try fail cycles, you've got a dozen chances to welsh on the deal, to try to back out. And in a lot of cases, especially with a good deal with the devil story, the character has to convince themselves that they have to keep going.
I agree with that. When knowing this was a short story, I didn't plot anything that should be, bigger than a short story. It was just, we're going to just tell this story. But I did, when I got to the end and the twist is revealed, and I'm writing the wrap up to the story, another little twist popped in that made me go, there's probably another chapter to this story somewhere. And that's just where the characters just won't sometimes you get your characters and they just won't let it go. So like it ends on this kind of ambiguous of like, well, this story ended, but there's something else that gets started because of what happened here. To whether we ever pick up those threads or not is irrelevant to this story. It doesn't take away from the story, but I think I could certainly continue on with that narrative.
All right, Bobby, we're going to have to work on Adam for volume 2. What do you think?
There you go. See?
Well, a lot of the time, the difference between happily ever after and dead is, where did I end the story?
I feel like I have more of a short story mind. I mean, I've written and published several novels, but I think the short story in particular can pack a lot of punch because it is so concentrated. I mean, you still have to make it feel complete and whole and satisfying to the reader, but like if you can do that in a concentrated story, I think it can have a very powerful impact on the reader.
What about you, Rachel?
Sorry, I'm having some trouble with the mute button on my phone. So like Alledria said, these try and fail cycles, if you look at Supernatural, there was like an entire season where Dean made the deal with the devil, and so there's like an entire season of him trying to get out of it. So I do think that there is the opportunity to draw it out to, either once you've made it, try to get out of it, or if you are being tempted to make it, maybe it's like that last ditch effort with some larger effort over here. So I definitely think that there's an opportunity to come at it from a variety of ways. And I remember Adam, he was like, are you planning on writing more with this character? And I'm like, no, not really. I don't really like her that much, and it's kind of hard to hang around her. And then I want to say maybe 3 weeks ago, I was reading a book. I was reading the Save the Cat Writes a Novel book, and started writing notes for the novel based on the short story character. I don't know if I'll ever actually write it, but there was definitely aspects of the Deal short story, the Devil's Due short story, that were showing up and saying, hey, I think there's some more story here.
I agree with that, Rachel, because one of the reasons why I asked you that was because the way that you wrote it, especially being like a detective type story, I felt like it was a character that deserved more storytelling. I was really intrigued by it, and I thought it was like it's the same thing. I mean, like honestly, with all of the characters, all the different stories or whatever. I mean, like Bobby, your story is set up to where you could have a million different stories based off of the same town and all that. And I feel like that everybody's been able to do that. But yeah, I think it was a good opportunity, Rachel. I felt like that's some of your best writing that I've read, and I've really enjoyed the story. So
it is amazing how sometimes the characters will. You think you're done with them, but they burrow into the back of your brain and just every once in a while remind you they're still there. I've certainly had that. I had my very first novel that came out back in 2005 had a secondary character in it that just will not, I can't get away from that character, to where this year he got his own story, because he's always reminding me, isn't this a good plot for me? You know? And so sometimes the characters that you don't expect to really do anything tend out to be the ones that stick with you longer. Or at least in my case, that's been, you know, how some of my characters have done. Because some of the characters I expected, this will be the character I write tons of things with. I did them once.
What about you, Josh?
Like for me, like I said earlier, it started off as kind of like a short film idea. So didn't really think of it as a longer, like more of a feature film, or in this case, like a longer, like full novel. It's always just been a short idea for me. But the way I write, I always leave things open-ended, because you never know. Maybe people will latch onto this thing. Maybe they'll latch on to this story, and they'll want more of it. So you kind of always got to leave that door cracked open a little bit, so you can come back and play later if you want to.
Now, so since you're doing both film and short story, what does it do for you in terms of the difference between the two mediums in telling the story?
I guess when you boil it down, like the story is still going to be the same. You're still going to have like that same progression as far as your story goes. And I don't know, for me, like the way it is, like when I write, I picture things in my mind. I picture them very visually, very cinematically. So the translation between writing a story and then filming a story, really the only difference for me is like the technical aspect of it, the actual filming, the actual, making of it, the actual sitting there in front of the keyboard and typing it out. So I don't, yeah.
With that, Josh, I was listening to Ray Bradbury's The Zen and the Art of Writing, and he talks about the same thing, because I just started listening and reading Ray Bradbury recently, thanks to Shane Nelson. And Mark is another one that loves Ray Bradbury. But he said in his that he had a lot of films or a lot of movies or short stories or whatever made into cinematic stuff. But he said that he had some of the student filmmakers did a better job than some of the Hollywood filmmakers, because the way he wrote was the same way. Was he had this visual, like a story being able to be played out as a movie when he was writing. And he said that when the student filmmakers would make the films, he'd tell them, follow, the story, follow the scenes by scene, and it'll, reflect that. And I do the same thing. Like when I'm writing, I feel like I see a scene in my head, like a movie scene of how it's playing out. So, I think that's one of the cool things about the way you write. And, and then when we were doing the film together, it was pretty cool.
So I'm going to throw one of these out there. So Adam, we didn't dive too deep into your story, and I held this back for a reason. So both.
I feel like I'm about to be bamboozled with the devil. Like, is there some kind of deal here, Jim? I mean, like, I don't know. Like,
there's always a deal to be made. I don't think I've got my horns on today. But you're both writing a story and creating a story in the universe, and you also felt compelled enough to create an anthology around this theme. So your story and your drive to create the anthology, what pulled you enough to drive into that space to want to both create the anthology and create that theme as well as your own story? How do you feel that it ties into the larger, not necessarily universe, but the larger theme of the book overall?
Oh, wow. I'm glad that you asked me that, because it happened the other way around. It was the anthology first and then the story after. It wasn't like I had an idea for a story and then like I wanted to do the anthology. I wanted to do the anthology because I wanted to work with all these authors, and I wanted to launch Valhalla Books, because as an indie author myself, I was just self-publishing, but I'd work with different authors, and I wanted to do something in publishing so that it would be kind of more official, So doing the premise with having a themed anthology, which we're going to do, I have an idea to have at least 3 of these, because A Deal with the Devil, you could do that a million different ways, a trillion different ways, 1,000 years from now, they'll still be talking about A Deal with the Devil, right? But I had this idea for, it was a story about a djinn. I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right, but a genie. And I had this idea for a story about a genie. And then I started reading up about the Djinn, and I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. And it was inspired because I was watching an episode of Ancient Aliens, and they were talking about the Djinn. And that's where the inspiration for my story came from. And I kind of just I just started writing it, and I was like, you know what, this would be a good fit for the anthology, and I just went with it. I kind of knew the publisher, so it worked out well. But
yeah, the publisher was kind of easy to work with on that one.
Yeah. It was one of those things. But yeah, no, it was definitely an experience. I feel like if it wasn't a good fit, I wouldn't have wanted to put it in there. Even though I wrote it, I just don't feel like it would have been a good fit. If it wasn't a good fit, it's not a good fit. But I felt like it was a good fit for this anthology. It was kind of by accident because I didn't even start writing it until I want to say like March, maybe this year. And it just one of those stories that kind of spilled out of me and boom. But yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
So not only with writing your own story, but reading all the different stories that came through, as the editor, what did you draw away from it in being able to see and compare and watch what all these different writers were being able to do in crafting story? And again, around that same idea of a trope, one idea of the trope, and yet you're reading through all of that. And it's a very specific one. So what did you pull away from all of these different stories that you didn't expect?
I was impressed with the level of writing that each one of the authors brought to this. And I feel like it's because the way that we crafted the idea of having a themed anthology, because every one of these folks here have been part of different projects, editors, they've been publishing, they've been doing, they all have a varied background of experience. And I feel like every one of the authors brought their best writing to the table, and they brought their best story crafting to the table. And when I saw that, because I've read from each one of these authors, and when I saw that, I was impressed. I felt honored too, because I was like, you know what, this must be something special for them too, and not just for myself, because I mean, obviously I'm a little partial, but it was such an honor to see that they're pulling out their A game, and they're saying, hey, I'm gonna, not only am I gonna present a story here, but I'm also gonna present what represents like my best work for this anthology. So that was something that I pulled away from it. As far as like craft, if you want to talk about craft, there's a lot of ways to write a story, but the only way that you can write a story is by writing it, and everybody has like a different method. So I really didn't pull away a whole lot with as far as craft goes, or as far as like the work goes. I did learn a lot about herding cats, if that makes any sense, because everybody this year has been so crazy that I had to extend the deadline. I had to do some other things, juggle some things around. The authors were very flexible with me as well, so we all worked together to pitch in and get this done. And we've been doing a lot of like pre-game stuff. I've been posting it, sharing it. The author's been posting and sharing it. So some of that nuts and bolts stuff, I guess I could talk about that as craft, but because that publishing part and advertising and marketing, that's also part of what goes into book, I guess, publishing. But I feel like the authors did a great job. And what I learned was that if you treat people right and you work with them, that they're going to do right by you, and they're going to put forth their best work. So that's one of the things I really appreciate about our group of authors in this anthology. So
I think too, from a writer standpoint, what really attracted me was Adam's excitement for it. Like when he called and told me what his plan was for the anthology, you could tell his excitement for the idea and for getting it out there and for doing it, and for starting Valhalla books and all this. Because I mean, I've known Adam for a few years, and he's always been very supportive of writers and the arts. Because before this, with the Savannah Quill and the convention and the But his excitement for it all was immediately the first thing that made me say, sure, no problem. You need a story. I can get you a story. So a lot of times from a writer standpoint, that helps too, is the excitement on the part of the publisher or the editor.
Thanks, Bobby.
You're welcome. I'll send you $5 later.
Oh yeah. Checks in the mail.
Yeah, I'll back up what Bobby says. Anytime Adam sends me a message, just like, "Hey, I got this idea," I'm like, "All right, cool, let's do it."
Yeah, that's me too. Every time I look up, he's got something going on, and he's like, "You in?" I'm like, "Okay, let me figure out how it fits in my calendar."
Oh my gosh, you guys are killing me.
So this actually broke a bit of a writing slump that I was in, because I had been in a situation where the most writing I was getting was maybe 100 words a day, if that. And it just, something about the idea, and especially when it started coming together, and then kind of talking in the Facebook group with the other writers and figuring out, okay, this is cool and we're getting there. Like that all just kind of sparked that again. And this, like I said, this was I did miss the first deadline. I didn't miss the extended deadline.
Deadlines make this wonderful whistling sound as they fly by.
Oh yes. But luckily I was able to, by that time I was like, oh, I'm going to finish it, just because it's a piece of writing that's working. And so that since then I've actually been able to get back into writing. So definitely, yeah, that was very helpful.
I want to throw a shout out to Rachel too, because I've leaned heavily on Rachel from time to time about being an indie publisher, and especially with your Chrome Girls Press. I was in Rachel's first anthology, and I just love what you've been doing with the whole thing. And I look at what you're doing as a really interesting model and good citizenship of the writing community. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to work with you, Rachel, was because when we first talked, Bobby introduced us. Thank you, Bobby, because you're like wonderful doing that. But when we first talked, and you had the idea about doing the anthology, and I really didn't know you that well. We'd done like an interview or whatever, but when we were talking on the phone, and you said that you really like to work with other folks who are professional, and that that you are committed to being a good citizen. That's what was the selling point for me, wanting to work with you. And since doing this Valhalla Books, so I try to do the same thing. So kudos to you, Rachel.
And just one last thought to follow up. I've worked with Adam and Rachel on both things, and man, it's so cool watching what you guys are doing, because it's not just like, okay, I made a book, here it is, buy it. You guys are like rockets, and I just am happy to grab on and go with you guys wherever you're going. You've got a view for the future. It's so cool.
Well, I was going to say to Adam that one of the reasons that I felt confident to start Chrome Girls was because of my experience with the writer punk anthologies, and seeing what worked. How did people come together and not just, like you said, produce the work and be professional, but find that creative energy, that excitement, like Bobby was saying, like Josh was saying, finding that excitement, and then sustaining it. Because I've been in so many groups, writers groups, online groups, NaNoWriMo groups, whatever. And it was like, oh, let's do an anthology. And a lot of times it was like, oh yeah, we're going to do it. And then nothing happens because they can't sustain that initial jolt of creative energy. And so working with you, Adam, working with you, Carol, and hopefully working some more with other folks in the anthology, hopefully we'll get there to just keep going and going.
Yeah.
Jim doesn't know this yet, but I want Jim is going to be a future Valhalla Books author as well. He just doesn't know it yet.
Be careful what you ask for.
You got to watch it too, man. You might be making a deal with the devil.
Yeah, I will tell you, I already tried that, and he refused to have me. By the way, that's a next anthology is going to be the one where the devil gets more than he bargained for. So.
The devil's like, no, not today.
Well,
Carol,
guys,
I didn't mean to skip past that, Carol. I had to hit that little joke, but Carol, I love working with you, and love working with all y'all. I mean, like this, there was a reason why I asked each of these authors, because I really enjoy them. You know, I've had a chance to talk with them, and just seeing their work, and they're all wonderful people. I mean, it's fun when you can work with a group of people that you enjoy working with, and you're working on a project where everybody's hitting on the same energy, hitting all 8 cylinders or whatever. It can be a lot of fun. There's a lot of synergy there. So back
It's
to you,
important to have that kind of passion that Adam has, because, when you're a publisher, there has to be the business-minded side of things. But if you don't have the passion for it, and all you have is, the business side, I don't think it's sustainable. And I find that people who have passion like Adam has, they also are working hard, because a lot of publishers will just dump a book, expect the writer to do all the promotion, which limits the reach. But when the publisher really has the passion that Adam has, I think you have a much greater chance of success.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Well, guys, I appreciate everybody joining and hanging out with us today for ConTinual. And like I say, I hope everybody's going to be going out and picking up a copy of the anthology. Can't wait to get mine. But before we get out of here, I'm going to give everybody just a moment to introduce themselves one last time. Tell us where we can find all of your stuff, where we can find you. And Josh, we'll start with you.
All right, so one last time, my name is Josh Vasquez. I'm the author of the Savannah Zombie novel series. So if you Google Savannah Zombie novel, should be like the first few links that pop up. You can find me on Amazon. I'm on Instagram, pretty much anything. If you type in Savannah Zombie, I should be like one of the first things that pops up. So I'm on Instagram. I do Facebook, but that's mostly like personal stuff. So if you try to friend me on there, don't be expecting me to friend you back, because that's just not how I roll.
Mark?
Mark Allan Gunnells. You can find pretty much all my books on Amazon. I'm active on Facebook, Mark Allan Gunnells. On Twitter a little bit, even though I don't really like it. Mark A. Gunnells. I'm on Instagram as Make Reading Cool Again, where I just post pictures of books. And I have my own blog at markgunnells.livejournal.com.
Allie? And you're still on mute. And you're still on mute. Allie, you're still on mute.
Hers is really easy. It's alledriahurt.com, and Allie is like the only Alledria out there on the internet.
And I am the first 5 pages of Google.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can go and repeat this for her, because, all you have to do is look for Alledria Hurt, and she'll be the first 5 pages of Google.
Actually, I'm the only Alledria on the internet.
I'm pretty sure by now we've gotten her to be the first 6 pages, but we're trying. Bobby?
Yes, I'm Bobby Nash. I am my website is bobbynash.com. I do have my own small press indie publishing company called Ben Books, and you can find that at Ben. It's BEN-books.com. I'm all over social media. I have an Amazon page. I'm on Facebook. I'm at author Bobby Nash. On Twitter, I'm at Bobby Nash, and on Instagram, I'm at Bobby Nash Writes. Yes, I wasn't smart enough to set them all up to be the exact same thing when I first set them up. But I'm also, I have, I'm on Amazon, Patreon, you name it, I'm out there.
Carol?
Hi, Carol Gyzander, and I'm Short Stories and Horror. You can find me on my website, carolgyzander.com, and same thing on Twitter and on Instagram, Carol Gyzander. That's me.
Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Brune, and you can find me online at www.infamous-scribbler.com, and that contains my blog and a list of books that I've either edited or contributed to in some way. I am also on Twitter and Instagram at Rachel A. Brune, RACHELABRUNE, and you can also find me on Facebook, and you can also find me on Chrome Girls Press. ChromeGirlsPress.com, and in the Facebook group. I accept random Facebook requests, so you can do that, but I mostly just post pictures of my dogs, so it's not super exciting.
And Adam.
Adam Messer, and thank you, Jim, for having me on here today. The two links that I want to share are ValhallaBooks.com and then DeadPixelPictures.com. Publishing horror, trying to do the best. The motto we have for Valhalla Books is that we want to share compelling fiction so that people enjoy reading again, and that's my goal with what we're doing, is just to shout out to the authors for all their awesome stuff, and I'm really happy that they're sharing their best work with us. And I feel like the readers, there's a lot of indie stuff out there, and I know that there's a million different hey, read my book posts, and I'm not just saying that because I'm part of this anthology. This is some of the best writing, and I typically am a nonfiction reader. I have a hard time reading fiction, but this is some of the best fiction writing and reading that I've done since I got back into reading fiction again a couple years ago. So thanks a lot for having us on the show, man.
And of course, you've got a radio show, the Adam Messer Show.
Yeah, I kind of, it's kind of funny. I don't want to plug myself too much, but I talk with authors, artists, and entertainers. Jim, you've been on the show several times, and
I have.
Really appreciate that. Everybody here has been on the show, and I love talking with other creative people about like their process, their projects, and then like overcoming obstacles. So we talk about a lot of the nuts and bolts stuff, on the show too. So, and one thing, I just kind of want to throw this back on you, Jim. I really enjoy the talks that we have, especially, like the behind the scenes stuff and some of the admin stuff, because, you have a wealth of knowledge, and you're always so willing to share it, and you're willing to like give somebody a straight shot with the answer. You're not going to fluff it up. And that's one of the things I admire about, being able to talk with you. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to cause trouble where I can and occasionally be helpful.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com. That'll get you both to the fiction me and the nonfiction me. You can also find us at authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, and of course, I'm here at ContinualConvention.com. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us here on Hot Off the Press and a Valhalla Books takeover. Thanks, guys.
Bye, y'all.